You're righty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things Hold'em related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. In this video, I'm going to be doing an addition to my Eldar Banshees, which I did a little while ago in a previous video, and I'm going to be adding an Exarch to that unit. I'm also going to be discussing some of their strengths and weaknesses, as well as some of the additions I'm going to be making to her that you can do from the codex to make her a little bit more punchy. And as well as that, I'm also going to be doing a colour scheme on her and a paint job that's very reminiscent of the red Rogue Trader style that we've got, but on a slightly newer model. So, hope you enjoy yourselves, and let's get to it. To the Eldar, all paths are strewn with dangers. The Eldar mind is capable of depth and understanding which goes beyond the concept of mere human obsession. Such dangers are likened to traps or nets, waiting to catch the unwary upon the Eldar path and hold him fast forever. When an Eldar's mind becomes so tightly focused upon one thing that he can no longer make the change to another path, he is said to be lost upon the path. This is a terrible and frightening thing for all Eldar, as it is a fate which can befall any of them despite the discipline and training that they receive. An Eldar who is lost upon the path of the warrior is called an Exarch. Such a fate does not befall an aspect warrior quickly, but the repeated acceleration of battle can act like a dangerous drug upon a warrior's psyche. Aspect warriors learn how to control their warrior selves, putting on and casting aside their warrior self as they don or discard their ritual costumes. An aspect warrior who becomes an Exarch loses this ability to disassociate himself. This has serious consequences because upon his death, an Exarch's soul cannot be freed into the infinity circuit, for its only impulse is to wage war. All other feelings are subordinated to their single deadly desire. Before we get started with the video properly, I just wanted to say that I'm actually new to Eldar and their background lore. I've known about their models obviously and loved the sculpts and everything for the whole time that I've been into Games Workshop, but I've never actually played them in the past. And reading this 2nd edition codex, I am really falling in love with their background lore and fluff. Fair enough, they're responsible for birthing a chaos god, and let's be honest, they've probably got the diplomacy skills of an orc with a hangover, but man, that lore is so deep and it really is drawing me in. It's just excellent. Anyway, that aside, let's get to it. The model I'm using for this unfortunately isn't an original 2nd edition / Rogue Trader Exarch model. It's the one from the 4th edition sculpts from the set that I did in the previous video. So this one is armed with a power sword, not a power axe like the original one is. So to make up for this in the rules and for putting it on the tabletop, what I was going to do is I was going to give her the Crushing Blow Exarch power. So that gives her a +1 strength for herself and her weapons. That would make up for having a power sword instead of a power axe. You might say, why am I not using a power axe? Because, to be honest, I'm a little bit of a stickler for WYSIWYG. Don't have to be, but I like to try and be a little bit. Now, recently though, I've discovered that Exarchs don't have movement 6 like the Banshees do. They only have movement 5. This is important because my entire game plan is going to revolve around getting these girls up the table as fast as I can and getting them into close combat. So when they have a movement 6 for the Banshees, if you move over 10 inches, your opponent suffers a -1 to hit penalty against you. So Banshees, movement 6, run them or charge them, 12-inch movement, -1 to hit. Exarchs, 5-inch movement, run them, only a 10-inch movement. It's not more than 10, which means that they're not going to be suffering the -1 to hit. Now you can do some strategic placing of her, make sure she's behind stuff so she's not the closest, but Banshees are only toughness 3, and they're going to die to a stiff breeze, especially when going up against chaos with bolters. So what I decided to do is to change out the Crushing Blow Exarch power and replace that with Bounding Leap, because that gives her a +4 inches leap movement at the end of her movement. I think I do have to do the full 4 inches in that, not, an extra 1 inch or an extra 2 or 3 inches. If that's true, if I do have to use the full 4 inch for that Bounding Leap and you know about this, let us know in the comments below so I can really cement her into my battle plans. But giving her the extra 4 inch movement with Bounding Leap means that I can run her forwards and she's still going to get that -1 extra to hit penalty against for the opponents to shoot at her, which is good. I will have to place her a little bit behind so she doesn't get too far ahead in front of the Banshees that she's with and the other things that she's going to be going along with. That's to come in the future. However, I think this should make her pretty decent. And with the Exarch, being her Exarch, she's quite good in combat as well. Power sword, shuriken pistol, which is what I'm giving her for this one, should be pretty good. So at least that's what I'm hoping. As I said earlier, the model that I'm doing this with is not, unfortunately, the original Rogue Trader era sculpt. It's actually this one, which is from the 4th edition sculpts. The reason I've decided to go with this one is because it actually has a more wide open and complete loincloth. So what I'm hoping to be able to do is go along with the paint scheme reminiscent of the Rogue Trader era one, and I'll be able to put more detailing and markings on her actual loincloth than I will be able to on the other ones that are from the 4th edition sculpts, who have the loincloth sort of scrunched up and you can't really see much of them from the front. So I hope you will all forgive me for not using an original Rogue Trader era sculpt and using an older edition one, but hopefully the colour scheme that I do and the way I do it does bring it back nicely to that older sort of time and brings back the nice sort of nostalgia hit for everybody. So let's grab yourself a cuppa and let's get to the painting desk and see how I do it. The first thing I'm going to do to try and imitate the Rogue Trader style colour scheme is I'm going to paint all of the armour with Evil Sun Scarlet. I'm going to try and miss like these straps and stuff like this, as well as her loincloth / tabard thing, and relieve that. This is going to go over everything else, so all the armour panels and everything. It's also going to go over the front of her faceplate. Just build this up over a couple of thin coats, and if you do get a bit on the parts that you want to keep white, it's not the end of the world because it's nice and early in this process, so we'll just be able to tidy it up. Once the Evil Sun Scarlet's been applied all over the armour, I'm going to go over with a coat of contrast paint Blood Angels Red. I'm going to put this over all of the areas that we've done red so far, so that includes her faceplate on the helmet and all of her armour. Work this round, getting it all over. You don't want to gloop it on there, and this will help to show up the armour plates a bit better, as well as give us some tone variation for later on. The next colour I'm going to use is Abaddon Black, and that's going to be painted over the mane of her helmet. I'm also going to do it over her hands, because by the looks of the picture she's got black gloves on, and I'm also going to base coat any of the metallic areas. So that's the entirety of this shuriken pistol, as well as any of the little jewels that are lying around the place, like these here, them and their surrounds. I'm also going to be doing her weapon holster here in black, as well as the little pouch on the side black. With the black done, the next I'm going to do is Screaming Skull, and I'm going to put that over all of these little tassel things, the straps around her leg here, and on her loincloth there. Loincloth, have a cloth, I don't know what you call it. After the Screaming Skull's been done, I'm going to start getting ready to do the hair. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by base coating all the hair in Corax White. Once the Corax White is dried, I'm then going to go over that with contrast paints Apothecary White. I'm just going to get this all over the hair at this point. And I'm also going to take some contrast paint Skeleton Horde and put that over any of the fabric areas, the Screaming Skull that we've done. The next part I'm going to do is the Power Sword blade, and for that I'm going to use Ironbreaker. I'm just going to put this all over the blade in one nice smooth coat. And also I'm going to put this on the grills on her face helmet as well, just because she's an Exarch, so I'm going to go a little bit brighter than I did the Banshees. Once the sword's been done, I'm then going to go to gold, and I'm going to use again my favourite, which is the Vallejo's Rich Gold. And I'm just going to put that over the sword hilt. Got the gem on his power sword here and the symbol. I'm going to use this, put this on the surround of it. I'm also going to do the entirety of her shuriken pistol in this. I'm going to try and leave just in there black. And these sensor nodules here I'm going to try and leave black so I can paint over them in silver later. I'm also going to do all of the gem surrounds that we've got. Doesn't matter if you go over onto the actual gemstone a bit itself, because we are going to go around and tidy them up before we paint them up as gemstones. I'm just going to go around the model like this carefully, finding all the parts that I would like to do in this gold, and I shall be right back when that is done. With the gold all finished, so that's the shuriken pistol done, the sword hilt, I've done the runes and the tassely bits on her side there, as well as some of the gem surrounds. And I've also put on the iron breaker on the gems there. Next thing I'm going to do is these little straps here, which I'm going to do with dryad bark. The next one I'm going to be doing is a few washes left to go. And the first one of these is going to be Ripeland Flesh Shade, which is going to go on all of the gold areas that I've done. After that is a little bit of Narn Oil, and that's just going to go on the vents here that's on her faceplate, as well as on her power blade. And we're just going to drag this from the tip down to the base, because we want the most of this to collect up around the base of the blade to help add a bit of shadow. And then to finish off, a little bit of Agrax Earthshade, which is just going to go onto the straps here. With the Rogue Trader era Banshee Exarch, she's sculpted with some braids on the side of her head mane, which have been painted a mix of red and green. Now obviously this model doesn't have that, so I was a bit stuck on what to do with it. I was kind of going through a couple of ideas and then I couldn't figure it out. And then I was going through an old White Dwarf issue 196. And in the back of that, there's a battle report. And you've got Lawrence Widdicombe's Eldar army. And in that one, he has his own Banshee Exarch. And now when you look at the braids, he's painted one of them green and one of them red without doing the sort of cross-hatching and mixing the two together. So from that, I've taken some inspiration from there. So I've elected to do this bottom strand of hair here in Cabalite green. I've done this so that it matches in with the pouches on the other Banshees, so it adds a little bit of consistency between the colour scheme. And it also, hopefully, will strike that nice little chord and remind me a little bit of the Rogue Trader style paint jobs. And on here, where these strands of hair are quite nicely sculpted and picked out, it's not too hard to just carefully and individually pick it out. And after the Cabalite green, I've decided to do this strand of hair in Evil Sun's Scarlet. So again, it ties in nicely with her armour and with the colour scheme in the rest of the units, where I've used this colour on their helmets. Now I don't know if this is supposed to be on both sides of her head. So I've not actually been able to find a photo of the original Rogue Trader era Banshee Exarch from her other side. So I'm just going to go with one side on this. After that, I'm going to carefully go in with some Quelia green shade and just do it on the strand of hair that I painted green. And then for the red, I'm going to go back in with the contrast paint Blood Angels red and try and be as careful and as neat as I can so I don't make a mess. Although if you do get some of the paint elsewhere, it doesn't matter. Because remember with this, Corax White is actually quite good coverage. So you can tidy up quite easily at this stage if you do get a bit of a mess. And the final colour that I'm going to base coat is going to be Caliban Green. And I'm going to do that on the eye lenses and on the jewels. So I'm going to try and leave the top corner of each of the gems where I imagine the light is going to be coming from black. So there you go. So like that, just paint the bottom part of it like that and just leave the top part. For the gem just here, I'm going to do a different colour than green. I'm going to do it purple. So for that, what I do is I base coat in Nagaroth Night. Don't worry that these colours don't show up that much at this early stage. They act as a base for later on when we're building up the highlights. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pin wash around all of the armour plates that are on her red body glove. And for that, I'm going to use Contrast Paints Wildwood. I'm just going to use the thinnest brush that I've got. For this one, it's still my Army Painter's Masterclass brush. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can just rely on the wash darkening off the edges around these armour panels. But it does add a nice little bit of definition to them, and it helps to help them stand out a little bit when you're doing the edge highlighting later on. Now we're on to the highlights. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by reapplying my Evil Sun Scarlet. And I'm just going to do that basically over the entirety of it. On the bits here like the cloth, I'm going to leave any of the darker areas left over by the Blood Angel's red contrast paint. And try and be careful and leave that dark line from our wildwood in there. And the same for the armor panels. Just going to give it an all over coat. After the layer of Evil Sun's Scarlet, I'm going to go to Wild Rider Red and use this as an edge highlight. For this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to, as carefully as possible, pick out the edges of the armor panels. And on the fabric areas, I'm going to pick out any areas with creases. Got around the butt. You've got a couple of the creases just here on her legs. So for those, what I'll do, pick them out as carefully as I can. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to her fabric areas, like her loincloth here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully reapply Screaming Skull, but I'm going to be very careful to leave just the very deepest parts. Try and be as close to it as you can. And at this stage as well, if you do make a mess and go into the recesses a bit too much and fill in too much of the paint, you can just go in with your skeleton horde and reapply. And this will probably take a couple of coats to get it a good, thin, consistent, smooth finish. Once the Screaming Skull's been finished on there and it's smoothed up a little bit, the final thing I'm going to do is take some Pallid Witch flesh and I'm just going to add this onto the very highest raised parts of this fabric here. So along the edges here, as well as the little knots on here, I'm just going to add little bits here and there. Basically your choice how far you go with it. To highlight the little green strand of hair, what I'm going to do is first of all pick the hair strands out as carefully as I can with Cabalite green again. And then after that little bit of Cabalite green, I'm then going to go in with a small bit of Sybarite green and just try and pick out a thinner line on the hair strands, and that'll just help to pick those out. And this will again help to tie it in with the other ones that we've done, in that this is the same colour we've used for the highlight on the pouches for the other girls. To finish off her mane of hair, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go back in with Borax White, and I'm just going to try and carefully pick out these strands of hair that are on here. Now you can just do it the way I did it with the other Banshees, where you just sort of overbrush, but I find that with this one, where the contrast paint does help to highlight the strands of hair quite nicely, you can just go over it a bit more carefully and pick them out. You don't have to. Plus there is the one of the fact that she is my Exarch, so I'd like to go a little bit further with it maybe, but whether or not it's needed is entirely up to you. Next up, I'm going to highlight the gems. To start with, I'm going to do this purple one here first. I'm going to start with a coat of Xerius Purple, which I'm going to apply towards the bottom part of it, and trying to leave that top part there, just at the top corner where the light's coming from, that really dark purple that we initially did it. And after that, it's going to be a little line of Gene Stealer Purple, which is going to be done as a tiny little line, as thin as you can get it, just on this bottom part of the gem here. And to finish it, what we do is we take a tiny little bit of Ceramite White, and we put a tiny little line just down here in that bottom quadrant, and then a little dot just where it's darkest. For the green gems, I'm going to start by using Warpstone Glow and applying it down into the bottom quadrant. Now this time I'm going to do it down to the bottom right hand quadrant, because I'm imagining the light coming from this direction and coming down onto it. So I'm going to have the darkest point there, lighter point down into the bottom right hand quadrant. So I'm going to start by applying the paint around here and trying to leave that bit at the top. And something like this, almost paradoxically, the fact that Warpstone Glow has got pretty abysmal coverage by itself will kind of help you here, because it'll help get a slightly faded line that you'll have to do a couple of coats to get a solid one to get rid of. And then go in with a second one, have a slightly less distant area, and that'll strengthen that colour up, like that. And then from there, I'm going to go to Moot Green, and I'm going to apply that across this bottom corner here, the bottom right hand corner, in a line going round, then a thin line going around the bottom of it. Covered a little bit more area than I wanted to, but it's not necessarily a problem. And then from there, to finish that off for a nice simple one, is I'm going to take some ceramite white and I'm going to apply a thinner line down here on the bottom. Try and do this directly opposite where you got your dark spot, and then a little dot of it just in the top corner where you got the dark spot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and I'm going to do all the gems and finish them off. With the jewels done and the eyes I've done the same way, I'm now going to start highlighting the black. And for that I'm going to use Thunderhawk blue. And on the pouch here, just going to pick it out nicely. The helmet, I'm just going to pick out the sensor node on the helmet, on the side of our helmet here. And you've got in here, I'm also going to do across the edge of the helmet visor like this. For our gloves, I'm just going to pick out the little parts on the back of her hand and then thin little lines on the top of her fingers. Once the black's been done, I'm going to go on and highlight the little brown straps with Gorthor brown. I'm going to pick out the upper edges of them, just like that, just to make it stand out. These are so tiny really, you don't have to be mega neat with them or anything. Just make sure that the paint's on there and it's not covering up all the dark brown. After that, I'm going to start doing the metallics highlights. And I'm going to go back to Ironbreaker and apply this over the flat of the blade like this, but trying to leave it down as we get towards the base. Once that's been done, I am then going to go up to Runefang Steel, and I'm going to do that along the sharper edge of the blade here. There's just one solid coat. Little tip for doing the sharper edges of the blade is if you hold the model at an angle, you can run the flat of the bristles along it like that. And I'm also going to use it as an edge highlight for the bits that we've just done Ironbreaker. And I'm also going to use this as an edge highlight on the gold. So areas like that, just around the ammunition bit on the handle. And if you've got any little gold surrounds like here, careful as you can. I'm still using my size 0 Rosemary & Co. There you go, just a little bit just on the edge there. Same on that one, a little bit to help it sparkle a bit. Yeah, and then we got a little armband here. Treat them like a jewel, so we do them on the top part. And you got the hilt of the sword, like that. Oh yes, and we've also got the little sensor node things on the gun. Hit them with that to help brighten those up. Be back when that is all done. Right, for a bit of detail on this one, I'm going to try something a bit different. I'm going to use the Banshee decal there, and I'm going to use the same hand decal there. I think that's the right one. I'm going to put that on a helmet, and I'm going to put that on her loincloth. And I'm going to do a little bit of something else to the loincloth probably. We should be back with those. Unfortunately, I didn't remember to save the footage of me putting the decals on or doing the base. So we're going to have to jump to the final reveal for this young lady. I decided to go for a Bale Tan symbol on her helmet and a yin-yang sort of decal on her loincloth. And I've got to be honest, I think I maybe overdid it a little bit with this one. I'm not too sure. Let me know what you think in the comments, whether you think it's pretty decent or not. I'm not too sure. I think the Bale Tan symbol would have looked a little bit better on her loincloth rather than on her helmet. Other than that, even though this is a 4th edition model, I'm really quite pleased with it. It definitely does remind me very nicely of the Rogue Trader era colour scheme in the with the bright red armour and her white hair. And the fact that she's got a power sword instead of a power axe isn't too bad really. And she's got a shuriken pistol to make up for that. And when she's leading the rest of her sisters into battle, I think this group looks very, very nice indeed. I personally am quite pleased with them. And even though they may be 4th edition sculpts, I think they certainly, at least for me personally, they do hit quite nicely with that 2nd edition sort of vibe. And the bright red colour scheme for the Exarch, like I said earlier, does really nicely hit that little nostalgic nail on the head for me. So even though it's a 4th edition model, you can use them for your Rogue Trader games quite happily. And that's if you're just a stickler for them. You may not be a stickler for the classic models. Not everybody is, and there is nothing wrong with that. I personally prefer the older models, but I think these 4th edition ones fit very, very nicely with the 2nd edition style ones. And with the Exarch finished, that's the first unit for my 1500 point Eldar army finished up. Even though these aren't classic 2nd edition sculpts and they're 4th edition sculpts, They do fit still quite nicely in with my 2nd edition army, and the addition of a colour scheme that's reminiscent of that era really does help to pip it off, at least for me anyway. The bright red in this Exarch armour really does bring it back for me for the Rogue Trader era colour schemes, and it really is very nice. Like I said, I'm not entirely too sure about the decal on the head. I think it might have looked better on a loincloth, but either way, it still looks pretty good, and I'm going to stick with it. If you liked what you see, why not give us a subscribe and hit that bell icon? Because the more people that subscribe, and the more the YouTube algorithm is going to grab these videos and start pushing them out further to everybody else, and the more people we can bring and discover 2nd edition 40k to. Also, if you would like a commission done, there is going to be a link in the description below to my commission painting studio. You can go there to look at galleries or get a quote if you would like. So with that, I would also just like to say thank you very much for watching the video, stay happy and keep the old hammer alive.